Let's take a look at what's making news in the markets this week. The state's farmers continue harvest at a breakneck pace. Numbers from USDA report corn harvest at 58%, which is 27 points above average. Even better for soybeans, 92% is harvested versus a 58% average. North Dakota State University's Frayne Olson joined me on Wednesday morning, and I began our interview by getting an idea of how harvest is looking in his area.
Yeah, we're actually in a very similar position. Our soybean harvest is well ahead of normal pace. We're actually nearing the end of it. Corn harvest is also well ahead. We're ranked at about 55% complete. Talked to several farmers that were just thrilled that they're able to drive straight up and down the field instead of having to turn for all the low spots or slough holes or having to fight the mud and back out of being stuck. So it was actually a pleasure to be able in the field this harvest and be able to get things done.
Let's talk winter wheat now. Planting in Nebraska almost complete according to the USDA. And then add to that over 70% of the crop emerged, which is a few points off average. From the North Dakota numbers I saw, condition a little bit better, but otherwise numbers pretty similar. Any early projections for the current wheat crop?
Yeah, it's a little bit early. I guess right now what we're really looking at is that planting progress and how many acres gets actually seeded. There are some concerns about the dry soil moisture conditions. Now I know the winter wheat guys, you plant in dust and the bins will bust. So it's really all about what happens next spring and as we break dormancy in the growing conditions. So it's a little bit early to get too much of a risk premium built into the marketplace, but it's definitely something that we're watching. And a lot of it does, again, have to be with the planting progress, how many acres are seeded. The concern is, will we see, because of the drier conditions, will we see some of those drier areas flip into a corn or soybean planting next spring instead of being planted to winter wheat this fall?
And Frayne, from what I'm reading, the big story with the wheat market boils down to dry weather in the world's leading export regions. And that's raising concerns about supplies for 2021. Break down for us what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is really the bigger story, is that the southern Russia as well as Ukraine, which are really very, very large wheat producing regions, and exporting regions, are now also very, very dry. This is the driest fall conditions they've had in several years. We've got pockets in Europe. Again, Europe has a lot of winter wheat that they seed, in particular France and Germany. They're also very dry. So the concern, as I said, just like in the U.S., will those winter wheat acres get seeded? Or will some of the farmers decide, no, it's too risky, we're not going to plant winter wheat, we'll wait to see what happens in the spring and switch to one of the spring seeded crops. So to put that in perspective, again, the Kansas and Nebraska winter wheat crop, the hard red winter wheat, competes basically head-to-head with the southern Russia and Ukrainian wheat. Very similar kind of milling and baking characteristics. But right now, Russia exports about 50% more. So they have really become that dominant wheat exporter in the global market. So if there's a cutback in plantings, some private analysts are forecasting up to a 15% reduction in seeded area in Russia. That would have a significant role to play in global wheat markets and obviously it would help us here in the States.
And what would that mean for selling strategies for farmers back here at home?
Yeah, and that's one of the things. Right now, the wheat market is kind of torn between what's happening domestically and what's happening in the corn market. So as we see corn going up, obviously the wheat market then follows fairly quickly. Right now, in my sense, the winter wheat market is really more closely tied with corn and looking for corn for direction. But as we get into spring, that's when I think the corn market and the wheat market will likely separate. And those emergence issues, as well as the rainfall during the growing season, in particular, again, not only in the U.S., but also that southern Russia and Ukrainian region, is going to be watched very, very closely.
And since we're talking selling strategies, anything in particular with corn or soybeans?
Yeah, for both corn and wheat, we have quite a carry in the market. And what that's saying is that as you look in the months for delivery into the future, there's enough of a carry or an advance on that to pay for a lot of the storage costs. So what that is signaling is that the market really is trying to provide an incentive for farmers to not only sell some now today, but also prepare for storage and give you an incentive to store for delivery later in the future. The soybean market is the exact opposite. Right now we have an inverse in the soybean market, which means the prices we're getting for nearby delivery are higher than they would be in the future. So the futures market is actually discounting you if you want to put the soybeans in the bin and wait for later. If you choose to do that, what you're really doing is gambling or betting that overall prices will be higher into the future. So the futures market as well as the cash market now providing an incentive for farmers to store corn and wheat, but a real disincentive for storing soybeans.
And on the subject of corn, I understand you've been getting lots of questions regarding corn exports and the numbers that the USDA has provided. What can you tell us there?
Yeah, we've actually had a very, very strong export sales season for corn, U.S. corn into China. Right now, the USDA, not only for global exports and import-export numbers, but also I think for domestic corn exports, a lot of private analysts are concerned that they're underestimating or undershooting the export potential we have. And again, a lot of that is really driven by that Chinese market. So the question is, when will the USDA numbers, when will the WASDE numbers start to reflect these more aggressive sales? And I do think that will come, but historically what USDA has done is made those changes over time. They tend not to make big shifts or big adjustments in one WASDE report versus another, especially on the consumption side. On the production side, obviously a little bit different with acreages and yields, but on the consumption side, they tend to make those changes over time. So I do think those adjustments are coming. It's just going to be a little bit slower to get there.